Here's some tips on how to dial in the Roland TM-2 with the RT-30K kick trigger module. Let's go. Before we get into discussing the exact settings and how to dial those in, it's important to understand that we want the kick drum itself, the batter head, to be tight as glass. This prevents the batter head from wavering and creating misfires. And naturally, we're going to stuff the base with pillows and blankets as well. The idea is to simulate that of electronic drum kit with a hard pad. One recommendation I do have prior to tightening the batter head till it's glass tight is to record samples of your kick drum in its natural form. Ideally, you can use the waveforms not only as your own kick drum sample within the TM2, but you can also later use that in softwares like Slate Trigger 2 in the studio, where you can oversample your triggered drum sound with the natural sound of your kick drum. The first setting is input. Because we're using the RT-30K with a single cable into a single input of the Roland TM2, we're going to use head and rim for this particular setting. If you're using foot blasters and or something where you require the two inputs, then you're going to choose pad times 2. The second setting is going to be type. Because we're using the RT-30K, that's what we're going to use as our options. Again, if you're using foot blasters or any other type of trigger device, you may want to set that to pad 1 or pad 2 depending on how many inputs you're using into the TM2. The third setting is sensitivity, which often gets confused with threshold, which we'll get into later. This setting directly impacts the volume at which you hit based on your style of playing. If you're a light player, you're going to want to increase the sensitivity so that the volume is a little louder than the actual strike force against the head. If you're a heavy player, you're going to want to decrease the sensitivity because you are going to clip, whether it be a PA or a DAW or whatever you're in, as you go from single strokes to double strokes, the intensity increases and you are going to clip. One recommendation I would do, find that happy place where the velocity hits around 100, not too much beyond that. The fourth setting is threshold. This controls the amount of impact required to fire the trigger. To hone in on this setting, I would recommend setting the threshold to its max value of 32 and working your way backwards using your left foot or weak foot with a single stroke on your weak foot pedal. You'll likely see consistent impact around 23 to 25 set as the threshold, but as you move into techniques like heel toe, which has that sort of gallopy style technique, the threshold will likely need to be reduced something closer to 17, 18. The fifth setting is curves, which is really the dynamics of the waveform that is produced when the trigger is fired. Because we want to retain some sort of human element, especially with a triggered kick, we don't want something that's going to create static waveforms that are uniform across the entirety of a DAW. If you're going to be recording in a studio, I would recommend sticking with log 2 or loud 1. If you're in some sort of practice situation and you just want that constant, the dynamics doesn't really matter, you just want to make sure you can hear it through your PA, then by all means use loud 2, but I do not recommend using that in a recording situation. Retriggering cancellation is just that. You're going to start with the lowest value and work your way up until the firing of the trigger disappears. Once that happens, you're going to back off slightly, and that's going to be the number you're looking for. Final setting to discuss is crosstalk cancellation. This is a phenomenon that occurs if hitting mounted toms or your snare is actually triggering the RT-30K. Crosstalk is influenced by fluctuations in the batter head when mounted toms or the snare is hit. Obviously, to remove the mistriggering based on the skin's looseness, we'll want to start with the lowest value and increase that while hitting the offending tom or snare and finding the percentage required to prevent the vibrations created by those instruments affecting the vibration of the batter head skin. By having a really, really glass tight batter head will prevent crosstalk from even occurring. For pedal mounted triggers, this setting becomes less relevant. If these tips were helpful, leave a like down below.